Daniel Dauphin with Dauphin Horsemanship back again. This is a continuation of the things to look for when buying a horse video. The first one was mostly on the aesthetic stuff, color and whatnot. And I should mention that, you could also be wanting sorrel with a flaxen mane and a blaze face. And that would be no different than a paint or blue roan, whatever have you. I'd say one of the main things that we absolutely need to know when we're going to buy a horse is what we're going to do with that horse. The standards that I'm going to hold one to are going to be very different if I have a fairly experienced rider riding this horse or if a kid's going to be riding this horse. That might be very different if this horse is simply going to be a trail riding horse or if he needs to, be able to win money in a performance world. Those are not necessarily the same kind of horse. This is in response to a lady that had asked me about what some red flags would be. The red flags would really depend on the intended use and what the horse is supposed to be. For instance, if I'm going to look at a colt who's maybe a long yearling and he's just barely halter broke, and I step in the pen and take a hold of the lead rope and his head kind of comes up and his eyes get real big, well, that's not a red flag. That would be just normal behavior for a horse that hasn't been handled very much. Now, if I'm looking at this as a kid's horse and he's 19 and he's supposedly been all over the place and he has a head up, big-eyed reaction, well, now that is a red flag. I'm always very, very interested in the horse's mind and their personality. I want to handle the horse. Even if it's a colt that's never been saddled, I've offered to make the first ride for the people. It takes up an hour and a half of my time, but I learn a whole lot about a horse by handling them and putting a little pressure on them here and there and seeing how they handle it. On average, according to what all the other horses that I've dealt with have done. If it's going to be an older horse that we're looking for, one thing I would strongly encourage you to do, first of all, you need to ride it, but you need to really ride a horse multiple times if that's at all possible, because good or bad, that first ride may not be a very good representation of what that horse really is. I'd really want to see somebody, if I were selling a horse to somebody, I'd want them to come and ride that horse several times and make sure that they get along and maybe ride that horse in various situations, in the arena, out of the arena, things like that. I'm going to be, of course, interested in the physical aspects of the horse. Again, the red flags really depend. There was a colt that I was just kind of helping a lady sell here not too long ago, and it got cold because he had a blemish on a back leg. Far as I know, this colt went through a colt start clinic with me. He was completely sound. The blemish was there, however. It stuck out maybe 3/4 of an inch on a back leg below the hock. I don't think it caused him any pain. It was an old injury. But if somebody were to buy that horse, looking at him this was an Arabian, looking at him for an endurance horse, that would be something you'd have to take into consideration. Would I absolutely cull a horse on something like that? Not necessarily. I'm not an expert on things like that. I believe in vet checks, especially if I'm spending some money on a horse. A $500 horse I might not get a vet check on, but a $5,000 horse, you betcha. So that's really where I would come in. If we need to x-ray that and see if it's merely a skin blemish, there's no bone affected or anything like that, well, then we're good to go. There are a lot of horses that sell for kids' horses that are in the twilight years of their career, and they're not 100% sound anymore. Maybe they have a little navicular or founder or any number of health issues, and they can only handle light riding at this point. Well, that horse could still have a very useful career, with a kid that's just learning how to ride, and we can feel very safe and secure about that horse and that rider, but it wouldn't be ready to go down the road anymore. One other thing I'm always looking at is the person selling me the horse. It's an unfortunate fact that there are some unscrupulous people in this world. There are people in the horse business that are that way. So I'm going to be reading the owner or the seller as much as possible. Another thing about that, I want to do background checks, or at least ask around if I don't know the person. I'm sometimes amazed. We all have the crooks in our various locales, and they're generally pretty well known. And if you'll just ask a few people, they'll give you the skinny on them. I'm regularly amazed at how those people find new victims, because those victims just don't ask a few friends, hey, have you heard of so-and-so? Oh yeah, you don't want to deal with him, you know. He's well known for sticking people. Also, I might be looking at the owner or the person selling the horse, and they might be pretty green in the horse business, and so my take on them at that point might be that this person doesn't have enough experience to really have a good opinion of this horse, so I need to kind of discount most of what they're telling me and just form my own opinion. Again, that doesn't mean I'm not going to necessarily buy that horse, but you know, I'm just going to add or take away some weight from their opinions of the horse. I believe in having some help more experienced than you, unless you are pretty experienced, to go buy one, especially if you're going to something like a sale where your little window to check that horse out is going to be pretty limited. You can definitely find some good horses in sales, but they also tend to be places where people go to unload horses with an issue. So you know, you get pretty experienced, and you've been to enough sales, you can spot the things that you need to be looking for. Also, always be sure and ask people. A lot of people might not tell you the whole truth about a horse, but they also won't outright lie whenever you ask the question. So I'm going to ask questions like, has this horse ever bucked? Has he ever reared, flipped over, run back to the barn ad nauseum? And I'm going to watch that person, and you know, they may tip their hand, or you know, you may. I'm kind of giving you the pitfalls. I don't try to assume that everybody out there is a crook, but you know, just cover your tail. Make sure you got your bases covered and your questions asked. I also want to say, for anybody out there that might be selling a horse that's watching this video, just because a horse has a problem does not mean that horse is going to be unsellable. You take a person like myself. If I were to be looking for a horse to buy that I'm going to be putting in my personal string, and let's say this horse is physically definitely capable of some high performance stuff, the kind of stuff I would be interested in, but he's a little bit cold back, that's not going to really turn me or someone like me off at all.